9:27, good morning. Let's bring you the latest news headlines. An American dentist and tourist hunter who killed Cecil the lion in Zimbabwe says he now regrets it. Warren Palmer insists he thought he was on a legal hunt. The police in Zimbabwe have arrested 2 people, and now Palmer himself may face poaching charges. He's understood to have paid around £30,000 to hunt Cecil, who took 40 hours to die. Melanoma skin cancers are rising at a worrying rate, say doctors, who've now issued new treatment guidelines. The health regulator, NICE, wants all identified black or brown skin spots to be examined with a specialist instrument, and for body imaging to include the brain. And they're still trying to get people to be cautious about exposure. 28-year-old Sam Holden regularly uses Sunbeds.
I am aware of different risks. I mean, you do see it, on the news, and you do read about it in magazines and things like that. Really, it is down to the user, it's down to you. So it's up to me to make sure that I'm safe when I'm using it.
An emergency cabinet session on Calais today after 1,500 migrants stormed the Eurotunnel terminal and 1 man is found dead. David Cameron has pledged that the government will do everything it can to tackle the crisis. He's been urged to hold direct talks with President Hollande of France. And lorry drivers want the army called in. A boost for Barclays, with profits up 25% to more than £3 billion. The results come less than a month after the bank's new chairman sacked Chief Executive Anthony Jenkins. Barclays is outperforming predictions despite having to put aside another £850 million to compensate customers. There are new efforts to improve the care of adults in their last few days of their life after concerns that some patients were deprived of food and water on the so-called Liverpool Care Pathway. New proposals encourage staff to involve patients and relatives in decision-making. Microsoft is launching its new Windows 10 operating system today. The company's giving it to its users free of charge. The system runs on personal computers and tablets, and later will be available for phones, game consoles and holographic headsets. The launch comes at a time when Microsoft is struggling to adapt to a world where PC sales are falling. Those are the main news stories so far. Time for all the sport now. Here's Ailey. Morning.
Morning, Victoria. Well, the big news today is the start of the 3rd Ashes test at Edgbaston. It is poised at 1-1. England, who dominated in Cardiff but were then hammered by Australia at Lord's. But they are back at the ground of arguably the most dramatic England Ashes victory. It's almost 10 years to the day, 10 years ago next week, that England won by that 2-run victory, which set them well on the way to Ashes glory back in 2005. We'll be live from Edgbaston ahead of this pivotal test in the series. Also coming up, Britain have won the first medals of the World Aquatics Championships in Russia. It was in diving, and it guarantees a place at next summer's Olympics in Rio. And it may only be July, but Celtic are preparing for their 3rd match of the season. They're in Champions League qualifying action tonight against the Azerbaijan champions Karabag. They were eliminated at this stage last year. They are hoping to certainly go one better. It's all coming up at around 10.
Thank you very much, Ali. Next, why are so many people not protecting themselves from the sun and putting themselves at risk of cancer? New guidelines on the treatment of melanoma, the form of skin cancer that claims more lives than any other, are being released today by the health watchdog NICE. It's hoped they'll end a wide variation in the diagnosis and treatment of melanoma across the NHS in England. In 2012, more than 2,000 people died from melanoma, and the number of cases is growing faster than any of the most common cancers. The numbers of people being diagnosed is expected to rise by 50% over the next 15 years. And experts believe that rise is largely down to the fact that we're all taking more holidays and there's a big increase in the use of sunbeds. So why isn't the message getting through? Our reporter Dan Johnson has been to meet 28-year-old Sam Holden in her local tanning shop in Wakefield.
Well, I probably come in about 3 times a week, something like that. Literally just come in and speak to Selena and just tell her how many minutes I want to go on for. Normally before that we'll sit down and have a cup of tea. I've even got my own mug because I'm here that often. It's kind of like, women put makeup on every day and, for a reason we do our hair and stuff like that. To me, that's kind of part of it. So I like to sort of, when, you know, different outfits, you might be wearing a skirt or something like that, and any woman knows that if you have white legs, you're just like not confident at all. You just think you just look absolutely minging. And when we go on holiday and we come back, you feel really sort of healthy and like you look a lot better because you've got this glow, which is what I really, really like. Well, this is the Sunbed. This looks like a bit of a beast, but it's a friendly giant. So
looks like a giant fridge.
It kind of does look like a giant fridge, actually, to be fair. So there's just sort of two areas, so you can just walk in and get changed, and there's a little light so you can see what you're doing, and then there's sort of various types of eye protection that you can use. You know, there's goggles or just stick on ones.
So that protects your eyes from the UV?
Yes, that protects your eyes from the UV as well. So, and then you just put your tokens in here, so it's just how many minutes that you wanted, so it's 3 minutes for one token, and then that activates the Sunbed, and then you just step on.
So it doesn't worry you?
Not at all, no.
Some people might say it's not worth taking any risk just to get a bit of a tan.
Yeah, and you can always get a spray tan, you know, if you're one of those people. I don't like spray tans because they wear off. Lots of people have them done for special occasions, so they might not want to be tanned all year round. They might be going to a wedding or a prom or a birthday party or something like that. Other people, like myself, just feel more confident with a tan, and they like to maintain it, really. And then again, it's just about you as a tanner.
Do they make sure that you're using this safely? Do they monitor how you're using it?
Yeah, there's lots of safety information that's available, especially if you've never used it before. You know, you can read all this information, and then you know, before you go on, there's lots of safety information, and you have a card that you fill in that's got all your details on as well, and you do sort of a little questionnaire about your skin type and any allergies and that kind of thing. So it's really, really thorough. My mum will appreciate that because she actually doesn't like becoming on the Sunbeds very much.
Really?
No, not really. I think she's just really worried about obviously using them safely. But you know, it's, like I said before, it's entirely down to you as a user. I am quite sensible with it, and she does trust me. But there is, you know, it's quite a common theme probably shared with a lot of parents or friends or relatives that will probably, if they don't use them themselves, there's that natural worry.
And how do you make sure you're safe then? Are you aware of some of the risks associated with it?
Yeah, I am aware of different risks. I mean, you do see it, you know, on the news, and you do read about it in magazines and things like that. Really, it is down to the user, it's down to you. So it's up to me to make sure that I'm safe when I'm using it, because you could go on any tanning Sunbed and you can either use or abuse it, really. So it's how long you go on for, what your skin type is. I don't burn, so I can go on for a little bit longer than maybe someone with a fairer skin tone. But again, as long as you know what you're doing and you're doing it wisely and sensibly, then can't really go wrong, really. Just get a nice tan.
Dan talking to Sam. Let's talk to Professor Mark Baker, who's from the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence, NICE, and Gary Littman, who's chairman of the Sunbed Association. Hello, both of you. I mean, Sam is evidence, not that you needed the evidence, that the message is just not getting through.
Yes, but Sam's aware of the risks and she makes her own choice. It's like someone who chooses to smoke, understanding what the risks are. It's something one can advise against but not legislate against.
New guidelines needed. Why, and what difference will they make?
Yes, this today's guideline on the treatment and diagnosis of melanoma completes NICE's portfolio on skin cancer guidelines. Melanoma is the most lethal skin cancer. Kills about 2,000 patients a year, about 1 in 6 of people who develop melanoma, and it's a particularly complex cancer to treat, with some key clinical decisions where there is little evidence to guide which way to turn. And what the guideline does is to try and expose the pros and cons of these various decisions and help patients and their doctors talk through the issues. These are particularly around whether or not to look for lymph node involvement, whether to remove those lymph nodes if they are involved, and whether to use scanning to follow patients up after initial treatment. The guideline also, as you've indicated, recommend the use of a technique called dermoscopy to assist in suspicion of people with odd lumps in the skin before referring to hospital, and that's a very good way of separating those who probably have melanoma and those who probably don't.
Gary, we don't really need sunbeds anymore, do we?
Well, it's not about the sunbed, it's about UV exposure.
We don't need them anymore, do they?
Well, we do, because we live in a country which lacks sunshine. Of course, we need sunshine
We don't
for
need
vitamin D.
sunbeds.
Well, we need sunshine for vitamin D, and we don't have the weather that...
But that's not why you provide sunbeds, so that we have access to vitamin D, is it?
Clearly, people want a tan. So if they do, then the best way of acquiring a tan is going to a salon that's in membership of the Sunbed Association, where we have a very strict and robust code of practice, where skin appropriateness is checked, and we say to people, if you've got fair skin, sensitive skin that burns rather than tans, then we'd rather you fake tan. But the vast majority of the British public can tan, do tan, and they're far safer using a sunbed under proper guidance than they would be if they were sunbathing in the sun, which is where the issue lies.
How can you say they're far safer using sunbeds than letting them go into the sun on their own?
You're indicating that a sunbed is different to sunshine. It's exactly the same. When people go into a tanning salon, they are checked, and the time that they're on a sunbed is verified, and the sunbed switches off. That doesn't happen in the sunshine. Far more people burn in the sun than they would on a sunbed. So that's where the issue is. It's about UV exposure in general, and it's about overexposure and burning, not about tanning.
In terms of the figures, though, more than 900 adults now aged under 35 diagnosed with melanoma annually in the UK. You don't think that's related at all to the increased use of sunbeds?
Well, the whole NICE report doesn't mention sunbeds at all. It talks about the issue that we're experiencing now is about abuse in the sun 25 years ago. The incubation period for melanoma is 25 years. I'm sure Mark will confirm that. So we're talking about people going on holiday 25 years ago and burning, not tanning, burning, and that's what we're seeing the figures coming through now. And the education is there now. It wasn't there 25 years ago.
I mean, it's not just about burning, is it? You can...
Yeah, well...
melanoma is provoked not just by being burnt when you were a kid.
No, although it is a major risk factor.
Yes.
I mean, all ultraviolet radiation does things to the skin. Some of them are beneficial, some are damaging. The most severe form is burning, and that burning, especially in childhood, significantly increases the risk of skin cancer, and including melanoma.
I just want to play this clip because it's an advert from the 50s, many decades ago. Clearly it will show how far we've come. Well, there's clearly a lot further to go, but it's just quite interesting. Have a look at this.
Go to any beach or open-air swimming pool these days and you'll find them there by the score. People who go very often, not to swim, but to get a tan. And why not? After all, as they say, too much bathing weakens you. But notice how highly technical it's become. Not only do we use suntan oil and cream, but scientific aids like this aluminium foil reflector. We said scientific, but of course this is strictly the do-it-yourself variety. Basically, it's used as a reflector, but because the foil is an insulating material, it can also be used for keeping things cool. Ice cream, for example, or in this case, a picnic lunch. However, most amateur scientists come sunbathers prefer it for roasting, not chickens, but themselves. Gone are the days when we would walk around only half-tan. This way we can get brown all over without being turned slowly on a spit.
Seems quite unbelievable now that actually was an advert back then. Professor Baker, what is the advice to people in terms of safety and the sun, or exposure to UV rays, I should say, and skin cancer?
Yeah, people need to be aware that ultraviolet radiation can damage the skin, and that damage can lead to skin cancer. Cover up in the sun, use sunscreens, don't get burnt, and if you are going to use a sunbed, don't get burnt using that either.
Thank you both very much. Thanks for coming on the programme.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, let's talk now to Dr. Justine Cluck, who is a consultant dermatologist. Also joining us from Spain, Peter and Sian Hardy, who run a beauty salon here in the UK with Sunbeds. Peter was diagnosed with melanoma in 2010, and actress and presenter Terry Dwyer, who was diagnosed with melanoma last year. Thank you all very much for talking to us. Terry Dwyer, how often did you used to use Sunbeds?
Well, it's very difficult to pinpoint the reason why I got it, but when I was 18, I did have a sunbed at home. And I guess back then I just wasn't aware of the dangers, you know. I don't remember my mum actually using sun cream on us, not that it was her fault. I think having a sunbed in your home is too much of a temptation to keep using. And at 18, your skin is still very young. I mean, between 15 and 34-year-olds, this is the biggest form of cancer at the moment. So I think that in itself, it's overexposure though. It's about overexposure,
yes.
Being sensible in the sun.
And when you are diagnosed with it, what impact did that have on you?
Oh, you just never think you're going to be told. I lost both my parents to cancer, and it wasn't skin cancer, but still, you know, I've witnessed firsthand not growing up without parents, getting married without my parents, them not seeing my children grow up. So I think when I was told that I had it, I didn't really hear anything else. I just thought about my two boys and how important it was for me to see them grow up and be a grandmother, all the things that my parents never really got to do with me. So it was devastating, really devastating. Thankfully, it was early stages, so I've been one of the lucky ones, but early detection is definitely the key.
Yeah. Did you used to own a sunbed?
I did, yeah, when I was 18. And it was just a bit all the rage. I mean, you know, the self-tans then, they're nowhere near as good as they are now. I mean, I frequently use the self-tan, it's brilliant. But back then, you used to get streaky, and it was quite the rage to have a suntan. So the sunbed, because we live in a country where we don't really get much sun, the sunbed was the easiest option. But now I realise it's probably one of the most deadliest. I just don't think there's enough information out there for young kids. They're still walking around with tans and not doing it sensibly. So I think really the government need to look at doing something like we did in the 80s with the big, you know, the HIV campaign that terrified everybody and thankfully did its job. We need something like that. This is a deadly killer.
Yeah, I mean, we have got regulations, legislation to stop under 18s actually using sunbeds. And I just wonder, before I bring in Dr. Justine Clark, you were, as an actress, you know, you're on TV, you're in Hollyoaks. Is there any more pressure for you to look like you are really healthy with a tan?
Look, we all feel that we look better with a tan, don't we? That's the thing. But there are other things out there. And it's about sun safe. You know, the key is not to burn. The irony is, my consultant said to me that you do still need a little bit of sun to help fight the melanoma. But it's about being sensible. And I just think kids today, particularly in the society we live in, the right messages aren't getting out there. I think it's great to say, oh, if you're under 18, you can't use one. How many kids are going to really listen to that? They want a suntan, they're going to go and get one. So I think the best option is actually to really put the heavy stuff out there and try and frighten them into getting sun dangerously. I think that's the only way we're really going to be able to connect with what is our next generation of kids.
Let's bring in Justine Clark. I don't think we're going to be able to talk to Peter and Sian in Spain, actually, because there's something wrong with the line. But anyway, thank you for being with us. Why do you believe cases of melanoma are increasing?
I think there's a combination of two reasons. The first is probably that there is truly an increase in melanoma due to ultraviolet exposure, be that occupational exposure, sunbathing, using sunbeds. But also, there is increased awareness of skin cancer and melanoma. And so I think there are also increased rates of detection. So people, particularly at this time of year, you know, are spending time outdoors in good weather. A family member may say, what's that mole on your shoulder? People may go visit their GP. So I think awareness has been increased, but I also think there is a true increase in the rate of melanoma due to UV exposure.
And is that of people like Terry's age who were exposed to sunbeds in their teens, perhaps, you know, some time ago, and we didn't really understand the importance of what UV rays could do to your skin, or is it?
It's actually a combination of both. So yes, melanoma is more prevalent in the older population, but we are also seeing increase in the rates of melanoma in younger individuals, so you know, those between 34 and 50, for example. Melanoma is the 5th most common cancer in the UK, but in that younger age group it may be the 2nd most common cancer. So So absolutely, as you
So
say.
why is the message not getting through then?
I think the message is getting through to many. I think there is still this myth that needs to be dispelled that there's such a thing as a healthy tan. We know with melanoma the risk particularly relates to sunburn episodes, so intermittent exposure to high intensity sunlight. But it's difficult to go out and seek a tan and not get burnt at all.
So use fake tan?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just a no-brainer.
Absolutely, and I also, this advice about vitamin D and people using that as their reason for seeking the sun. One can argue that if one truly is low in vitamin D, you can increase the vitamin D in your diet, or you can have supplements for vitamin D. So I think we really should be discouraging behaviour going out to seek a tan.
It's got to be one of the most preventable cancers, surely, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we think that 86% of melanomas are linked to UV exposure, and of course that can be reduced. So that is something that we can actively do to reduce skin cancer. Melanoma.
Bethany says, Terry, you might want to react to these. These are people who are watching you both speak at the moment. A text from Bethany. The amount of people who laugh when they burn and say, oh, it'll go brown, is really worrying. And Gillian says, my cousin was diagnosed with skin cancer at 25 years of age. He died a year later.
Well, this is the problem, because actually quite a lot of the moles can be non-symptomatic. I suffer with a lot of dysplastic nevis. Now, if you follow the ABC guideline, mine are all discoloured and jagged edges, and I think if somebody who didn't have a trained eye looked at me would be panicking, saying, my God, you're covered in melanomas. So the one that actually I had was the tiniest black dot on my back. Who looks on their back? Who can keep a check on the amount of moles that I possibly have? So I do think you've got to be vigilant about it. I have all mine photographed now. They have, I mean, the NHS have been absolutely incredible. I get photographed, I get checked every 3 months. I'm my first year clear. And it is important to keep on top of things like this. There are some that are symptomatic, but others they're not. And unfortunately for the message that you've got, that one possibly wasn't, and it was further down the stages when it was detected.
Thank you both very much. Thanks for coming on the programme. And actually, Gillian goes on this email. Doctors put my cousin's death down to the fact that he was burnt as a child. It opened my eyes. I have very fair skin and red hair. I stay out of the sun as much as I can, and when I'm in the sun, I'm always safe. Is your life really worth losing over a tan? Please, everyone, think twice. My cousin didn't want a tan. He was unlucky. Please think twice. Thanks for joining us today. Coming up in a few minutes' time, should the army be brought in to tackle the numbers of migrants in Calais? It's what some truck drivers want, and it's what the leader of UKIP, Nigel Farage, wants as well. We'll talk to him live in a few minutes' time.